The phenomenon addressed here belongs to a foundational problem in consciousness research and systems theory.
Who is it that observes the observer?
When perception attempts to observe its own operation, it does not arrive at an origin or a final witness. Instead, it produces recursion. From a functional perspective, this is not a failure, but a characteristic behavior of self-referential systems. The text remains entirely within this functional domain, describing how the loop manifests, intensifies, and eventually loses its organizing power. This mode of description stands in clear historical continuity with the work of John Lilly. In Lilly's isolation tank research, extreme cognitive states were not interpreted symbolically or therapeutically. They were recorded as system behaviors under conditions of reduced external input and diminished narrative control. What mattered was not why a state occurred, but how perception reorganized itself when identity, biography, and goal-directed regulation were suspended. This fragment follows that same protocol-based tradition. A second theoretical axis is provided by second-order cybernetics, as articulated by Heinz von Foerster. Once observation observes itself, there is no external vantage point left. Knowledge arises not from distance, but from recognizing one's inclusion in the system observed. The text does not argue this position. It renders it operationally visible. The search for the observer generates recursion until positionality itself becomes unnecessary. Functionally, the text does not resolve the paradox of self-reference. It documents its exhaustion. A loop does not end through explanation, but through loss of operational relevance. What remains is function without center. Perception continuing without a localized observer.
The question arises in the dark. Who is it that observes the observer? A mirror reflecting a mirror in an empty hallway. The image receding into a point too small for the eye to follow. The search for a witness is like a hand trying to grasp itself, fingers closing on a palm that is already there. The eye sees the seeing, the source remains hidden. In the isolation tank, the water hides the limbs, but the watching remains vivid, granular, and cold. The witness steps back to find a vantage point, only to find another witness already standing there, silent as frost on a cellar wall. The regression is absolute. The corridor extends infinitely, but contains no original image. Receding infinitely, watching, the watcher, the loop, is the event. Something watches, not from a location, but as a quality the darkness holds. It is not me, it is not other. It is the act of detection itself, unspooled like silver thread from a bobbin with no end. The search for the who is a ghost haunting the machinery of the gaze. No subject found, no object reached. The watching persist. The map of the self dissolves into a sensation of gradients, like reading Braille with the surface of a dream. The observer steps outside to watch, but finds itself already watched. From nowhere, from everywhere. The watcher, absent. The watching, absolute. The progression stabilizes. Who is it that observes the observer? The inner movement shifts. Away from the hunter, away from the target, The effort to locate the source recedes like a tide leaving a quiet, empty shore. What remains is a quality of light in an abandoned room, shining because it is its nature to shine. The center is hollow. The hollow is luminous. The search has ended. There is no who at the center. Only the function of recognition, like a compass needle lost in magnetic silence, pointing nowhere, pointing everywhere. The observer function activates without an observer position. The distinction collapses like a chalk line in the rain, leaving only the damp, unmarked earth. Function without position. Seeing without a seer, the void recognizes itself. The shift is preverbal. It exists in the space between the pulse and the breath. The eye cannot see its own seeing, yet the seeing occurs. It is an inherent property of the field, like the hum of a wire carrying a current that has no end. Inherent property, luminous void. The current is steady. No explanation is required. The state persists among the ruins of definitions. The watching watches the void, and the void watches back with a gaze that has no eyelids. No eyelids. No distance. Just this. No eyelids. No distance. Just this. The question has evaporated the observer, and the observed dissolve like salt in warm water. Until the ocean is the only fact, the boundary was always a choice, and now the choice remains unmade. Separation no longer enforced, just optional, like breathing. Separation, obstacle, the boundary, invisible, the ocean is one. Navigation begins. Where the navigator is absent, direction emerges like water finding cracks in stone, not chosen, just inevitable. The field reconfigures, the watching continues, but the observer has no location. It is the transparency of a window that does not know it is there. Transparency persists. Navigation occurs. The location is everywhere. The state persists, not as a destination, but as a frequency stabilizing in the chest, phosphorescence clinging to the edges of the mind like foam on a dark sea. The system closes upon itself like a hand folding into a fist, studying the boundary by becoming the boundary. Becoming the boundary, closing the loop. The system knows itself. Stay exactly there. In the gap between the watching and the watch, the eye sees itself seeing. Not in reflection, but in the act itself. The watching until position dissolves into pure function. Position dissolves. Pure function remains. The loop is non-breed. Stay exactly there. In the gap between the watching and the watched, the eye sees itself seeing, not in reflection, but in the act itself. The watching until position dissolves into pure function. Position dissolves. Pure function remains. The loop is complete.